Hello, my name is Pete Tseronis, and I am super excited to be with you today to moderate, to participate on the Anterix Industry Insights episode 13, which we know will be hopefully educational, a little bit informational, and absolutely enlightening. We have an incredible panel of guests, thought leaders, as I like to think of these folks, who are human beings with great stories and tons of passion. We're going to talk about a topic that most people are probably reading about and hearing about in the news: energy, technology, the integration of operational technology with information technology. We're going to make references and have acronyms that we will explain and tell you where you can go read about more of that topic. The federal government, industry, and academia are very, very invested in this build a more resilient critical infrastructure in our country. So while it's titled A Collective Approach to Securing the Grid, I want to give a shout out to the wonderful folks at Anterix, absolutely Danielle and Anthony and team pulling this together, but from Morgan O'Brien, from Chris Gutman-McCabe, Rob Schwartz, in no particular order, Ryan Gerbrandt, Raphael Sulit, there is such a passion for Anterix to kind of be that bridge, connect some dots, if I may, with the energy industry and stakeholders, as well as this influx of information technology experts and products and solutions. And the message you'll hear is that it takes a village. So without further ado, our guests today: Don Gray, Chief Technology Officer at Packet Viper; Peter Fischer, Director of Cyber Programs at Sierra Nevada Corporation. And he'll talk a lot about his incredible solution of binary armor. Dr. Ron Indek, yes, Dr. Ron Indek, amazing, amazing thought leader and storyteller, Chief Executive Officer of QNet Security. We have Mr. Scott Packard, Principal Program Manager at Cubitek. So a little bit of quantum will build into this discussion. And Scott Martin, Chief Marketing Officer at Enclave Networks, a great company that knows Zero Trust inside and out. So before we jump into our little icebreakers, I would like to have our guests sort of humanize themselves, fill in a few blanks, because I'm not a fan of reading the bio. So we're going to start in the upper left on my screen with Peter Fischer, Director of Cyber Programs. Peter, tell us a little bit about yourself, your passion, and why you love doing what you do, where you do it.
Thanks, Pete. So as you said, I'm the Senior Director of Cyber Programs at Sierra Nevada Corporation, or SNC for short. I've spent about 2/3 of my career building those systems that we're talking about protecting. And then the last third of my career, we've been working on the cybersecurity and how to take some of what I've learned as an actual engineer, designing and building control systems and embedded solutions, and put some of those approaches into how you can protect it. So our product, Binary Armor, is very much focused at how would an engineer take on the challenges of operational technology. And Sierra Nevada Corporation, real quick, as a defense contractor, we really focus on the national security aspects of cybersecurity. So we're looking at protecting against those hardest, most critical threats.
Well, you didn't do yourself enough justice, so let me brag a bit more, as humble as you are. And all these folks, for our audience, are humble, amazing human beings. But Colorado State University, he's an electrical engineer, maintains, if I'm not mistaken, like 4 patents and probably more in queue. So he, with 28 years plus, folks, is someone who gets the business side, but also the technology side. And we're looking forward to hearing a bit more about the family of cyber solutions that are really focused on the IoT, SCADA, and the critical infrastructure sector. So welcome, Peter. Mr. Don Gray, Pittsburgher, from the Berg. What are yins up to these days? You know, the Steelers, you know? No, Don Gray, go ahead. Same question, a little bit about yourself, your passion, and a little bit about your journey to this place where you are in your professional career.
Yeah, so I spent about 20 years building and running an MSSP, Managed Security Service Provider, in the IT space. And so starting out at the very early days with IDS and moving into a bunch of different security technologies and how to sort of operate and manage those over time. A lot of lessons learned from that. What is possible, what's cost effective, what actually gets used by organizations, what they can manage. So a lot of lessons learned that we think we're bringing to the OT space and the OT security challenges based on avoiding some of those sort of pitfalls and mistakes that we made on the IT side.
Well, 2 acronyms already out of the box, MSSP, Managed Service Security Provider. Is that kind of what we're talking about? And then IDS, Intrusion Detection Systems, for my mother-in-law, who I hope is watching this and is going to learn something.
Absolutely.
Thank you, DG. You are the man. And again, great group up in Pittsburgh, folks. They get it. They understand it. They're working with the critical sectors. And yes, they were born out of a cybersecurity, DNA. So welcome, Don. Dr. Ron Indek, a friend, and let me brag, the guy is someone that I got to know a while ago. He's an educator. He's clearly pretty talented when you've been awarded 75 patents or more. Again, I'm going off what I pulled off, as most publicly available. He's got a PhD in applied physics, electrical engineering from the great state of Minnesota at the University of Minnesota. And Ron, you've taken over a company that, well, it's doing some great stuff. Tell us a bit about that journey of yours.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to tell you not just about what we're doing, but also to work with everybody in Anterix and get to where we need to be. Yeah, as an applied physicist, of course, I've done just about everything but applied physics. So working with information storage and information technology, information theory, working with materials, magnetic and optical materials, working with heterogeneous computing, and even getting into trading. So what's the common thread through all of that? It's been security. A variety of different things have led us to and through that security vector. And we started QNet Security for one simple purpose. It may not sound like it's very sexy, but it was to protect critical national infrastructure. It was a really hard problem, and we'll talk about that today. But, we tried to skin the cat a little bit differently and see how we could come out ahead so that we can provide this country and the world with secure national infrastructure.
Yes, and if I may, given that for our audience, these are thought leaders. There's no intent to sell, but to tell. And I want to go back to, again, the Security Collective being something that was born out of Anterix as an opportunity to bridge the OT world, where they have their active ecosystem of utility stakeholder colleagues and partners. This is a chance to bring in that IT side. So again, shout out to the great folks at Anterix for creating this conversation. I did want to say one thing because Dr. Ron brought it up, but when you read about QNet, it says an impenetrable barrier between defined endpoints within your existing network. That's pretty powerful. So we look forward to hearing a bit more about how you do that. Okay, not down, but let's drop on my screen. Scott Martin. Scott, I know you get that zero trust is a big deal. It's all over the Beltway. It's in every marketing material out there. I think that you're going to bring a great piece to this, that storyline around branding and marketing to the mission of whoever your customer is. But tell us a bit more about how that has shaped your passion for this topic.
Yeah, I mean, you talked a little bit. So first off, it's great to be on with Anterix and the Security Alliance. And in fact, we did some work previously where the title of it was, how do you deliver real, true zero trust through an ecosystem? Because we recognize the importance of those kind of relationships. So this is a good fit for that. You mentioned it, about a little bit about background. I have years ago started in some early internet startups in California, which I could write books about. And I was early into Bluetooth, working for a little company called Motorola, and continued working on emerging technology around IoT. So I've always been drawn to kind of those opportunities and how do we really effectively commercialize these technologies for the greater good, for the benefits of it, not for the technology itself. So that's what drew me to Enclave Networks, where I work with a great team of people. And our focus is around something called zero trust. And we'll obviously talk about a little bit more of it today. Originally from Florida, and I've been to 49 of the 50 states. So if somebody wants to guess the one I'm missing, we can play that game later.
Yeah, or play Wordle or something like that. That's a pretty good one, guessing game. By the way, I'm a big Dolphins fan, so love the state of Florida in that sense. Hey, couple things though. I love the entrepreneurial spirit. I think we all know that in this day and age, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of interest in the investor community, and I think being able to articulate something like a zero trust framework, which I know you know, is not something you just go buy. We talked about that. It's something you must build, and working in partnership is critical. And hey, you mentioned Motorola. I can't again without going back to the great folk at Anterix. The telecommunications, the background. What underpins the grid today and other critical sectors, folks, is the ping, the power, and the pipe. And if you understand telecommunications and spectrum like Anterix does, I think that makes for a great foundation of expertise to leverage the IT brilliance that this collection is on screen today, and why they created their security collective. So, not to close out, but at least this opening part, let's go to Scott Packard from Qubitekk, not Qubitekk, which I was calling it, but Qubitekk. Scott.
Hey, thanks, Pete. Tough act to follow here, wrapping up. So I bring a little bit of a different perspective to the idea of resiliency in the energy space. I spent 20 years learning how to take apart systems, energy systems, as an infantryman in the Marine Corps, and I've seen from Mogadishu to Iraq what happens when critical infrastructure that people depend on, has been eliminated. We're shifting from the days when it used to be physical destruction that we were worried about. Now, our principal threat is from cyber threats. At Qubitekk, we have a unique approach to bringing a level of security mostly focused on future threats. You may have heard of quantum computing, and quantum computing is going to introduce such great opportunities, but it's also going to bring potential threats. And those threats have to be thought about before they actually become viable. And so at Qubitekk, we have a mechanism for providing quantum safe security. Now, a lot of people look at quantum mechanics and say, oh my gosh, my head hurts. I'm here to hopefully make things a little more approachable to you. I've got scabs on my knuckles from dragging them on the ground for 20 years, and if I can understand it, then certainly you can.
Well, that's a taste, and hey, if anybody Googles quantum, there was a show called The Quantum Leap. So sometimes, for what it's worth, I describe people that it's just really fast supercomputer one day that's going to help us, not have to hear those words like, hey, you have pancreatic cancer. Instead, it's, hey, we can fix that. And quantum computer and speed and the investment in all kinds of chips and things and all that good stuff is hope for our country and the greater good, as Scott brought out. Okay, so now we're going to go back to some context. The grid, the industry. I like to start with I have notes, by the way, so that's why I'm looking down, and I just have so much I want to express. But folks, we're going to use the words critical infrastructure, those listening today. There are 16 sectors that are considered most critical in our country. I can list them all, but think of the energy sector, think of food and agriculture, which is one, think of water and wastewater, think of dams, chemical, manufacturing, the things we rely and depend on every day. It's the reason our $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill act, as it is now, passed. Not Build Back Better, that's another discussion, but the one that said we need better roads, planes, trains, and automobiles. And Don Gray, more than anybody knows, just this bridge collapsed when the president was up there, and it was obviously, thank God nobody lost life, but that's the reality, folks. Think of any natural disaster. Our power grid is 160,000 thereabout miles of high voltage power lines, 9,200 electric generating units, 600,000 miles of transmission line, 7,300 power plants, give or take, and everything from the ISOs, the RTOs, the NERC, the FERC, the state regulatory and utilities, and then now IT companies are in this discussion of how do we create a more resilient grid. Not reliable anymore, but resilient. That's a term we will hear, and we will reference things like Executive Order 14028. I will remind folks who are watching, if you're listening or tweeting, there are great resources to learn, but today is about celebrating IT thought leaders and a company that's bringing them together. So that was some context. Now, we're going to try a thing where I'm going to ask in 5 words or 8 words or 9 words or maybe 11 or less, just to break some ice. I have a question for each of you. And we're going to start with this one. Peter, You're the stuckee for the first one, Peter Fischer. In 5, give us your quick reaction to what security concern is the electric utility industry not considering enough today?
Advanced persistent threats to operational technology.
Persistent threats to operational tech. Great answer. Don Gray.
I would say the automation of OT security response.
Good one. Dr. Indek.
Okay. Software is not provably secure.
Nice. We'll get into that. Mr. Martin.
Yeah, we talk about the vulnerabilities of commingled OT and IT, but I want to double bonus score here because there's another one that comes to mind. Sometimes it's tough to take the first step. So harden your most vulnerable assets. Take that first step, and that's in 5 words too. So maybe it's 10 combined.
Hey, bonus points or you get subtracted points because you had some more to say there. Scott Packard.
Brevity is the soul of wit. So ignoring nation state threats.
Yes, in a world that is, yes, ubiquitously connected with the Internet of Things, the industrial Internet of Things, it's not just in a silo anymore. Great answers to break some ice, and I took a few notes. I heard things, translated to mitigating risk is the key, right? Not a silver bullet. Doing your technology due diligence, knowing the capabilities of each of these products, obviously, and companies that you all represent are important. If you're being sold into and you're buying these tools, you got to do your due diligence. So I would agree that the electric utility industry is not unique, but of the 16 sectors, it powers all the others, right? Electricity is, we turn the lights on in our house, we flip the switch, we hope it turns on. And now we've got this expanded, evolving threat landscape that, we need to protect because we want the creature comforts of our iPhone turning off a thermostat. We trust that our car with Bluetooth is going to take us from here to there, but there's some bad threat actors out there that want to compromise humanity. And we want to talk a little bit today about, how to think about that when you're making investments in products such as yours. Let me start with this, guys. And Peter, I'm going to come up to you here, Peter Fischer. The executive order, which was dubbed the Order on Improving the Nation's Cybersecurity, came out last year, May 12th, post-colonial. And just on page 1 alone of it, and I'm just again reading, you can read this, folks, it's Executive Order 14028. It says, the scope of protection and security must include systems that process data, information technology, and those that run the vital machinery that ensure our safety, operational technology. The order itself goes on to talk about advanced analytics, the cloud, zero trust architectures, collaboration, workforce reskilling, retaining, and recruiting, and that sort of thing. Can you share, each of you, and this is start with Peter, that how do you feel that executive order really accelerated your mission to help secure our nation's grid?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we focus on at Sierra Nevada Corporation is edge security. And edge security being the ability for those critical systems you mentioned, those operational technology systems, to be able to be protected and connected to a network that honestly may be compromised. So protect them against all possible threats that they may encounter. And I think that executive order highlighted a lot of the things that are coming, the things that we need to look as a security industry. We need to be able to look forward and say, yeah, we're not going to protect against today. We're not going to protect against yesterday. We need to protect against tomorrow. And I think some of the co-panelists here really talk about it. We've got a couple of approaches that we look at it of how can you help future-proof these systems so that they can be resilient and not just protected against what we know today. Because if we're protecting against today, it's a cat and a mouse game. If we're protecting against all possible threats, then we're really providing resiliency and we're giving people value in the solutions that they have because they're buying something that they can really capitalize for the next 10, 15 years of security.
And again, it's going to evolve. And I think the message I'm hearing is, look, you can't buy something and then say, we're good for the next 5. There'll be new threats, there'll be new situations where it's, ransomware comes up and, crypto's in the news and blockchain. There's all this new stuff that, I think when it comes down to is, do I have the right tools in my toolbox if I'm a utility buying these great tools that will protect the very assets, the data that my company depends on? Yes, Peter.
Or if I could just do a follow-up, does that tool support helping you future-proof, or does it solve my immediate problem? That's a great way that you worded it. Is that tool something that's going to help me get to where I want to get in 10 years?
Yeah, and if we can all agree that the train left the station of, hey, buy it and don't worry about it for 10 years, it may still work, but now it's buy it and you better be checking in on it. Hey, Don, let me come to you because you and I have talked a lot about some of your use cases. This reference to the devices, the ubiquitous connectivity, the internet and the industrial internet of things. Sensors are places here, there, and everywhere. For everybody listening in, I've had the luxury of visiting some of these places, power marketing administrations in rural parts of our country that, when there's something that alerts an individual on a SCADA or a control system, somebody in an office might have to jump in the car, drive out for a bit and find out what went wrong. Packet Viper is really adopting to not only securing data, but having that actionable intelligence with some of its capabilities. Can you speak a little bit to this IoT space that's becoming, a burgeoning area for cyber and companies to come in and help say we can, help protect that, but also give you the insight that you don't get in real time?
Yeah, so those distributed OT assets, right? That's really one of the things that we've been focused on, like you said, where you, instead of having to roll a truck, or instead of having, the time span of hours, days, weeks, or months till a response happens, trying to get that down to be something more close to real time, so that you're automating the ability for those assets to be protected and those cyber physical systems to be able to run their process and do so without harm. So, I take a little bit, maybe a little bit to what Peter said about, looking towards the future. I think at the same time, we have to be realistic about the fact that these threats are evolving very quickly in industries that traditionally haven't moved as quickly because of the tremendous capital, expenditures that they have. And so, I think about, back to my IT security days, I think about things like application security where, doing it right, building it in and fixing it is the right answer, but it takes a lot of time. And so, also, I want to protect against the future, but I'd like to quickly get some value out of security solutions immediately if possible.
Ron, speak a little bit about what the fellas have said to kind of get it going, and thank you, Peter, but also, hardware-based encryption, right? Mouthful. Can you, in your own storytelling way, kind of talk about why that is, you could say at the most fundamental level, the most important thing you got to be thinking about? Because people hear software and they hear, oh, code can be, but compromised. Hardware encryption is a big part of the QNet brand. So, thoughts?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and something to focus on. We talked, I think it was Scott who talked before about some of the threats, instead of coming from bombs, being sent our way to something over the horizon, so coming across the network. So we have to be, and as Peter and Don just said, we have to be thinking about what's the future. And while there is no single bullet, no single solution that does everything that you need it to do, you do want to be thinking about future proofing. I love that, Peter. And thinking about what is coming next and how you can protect against that. So if you think about your network as your house, and we can put sensors in the house, we can do all kinds of things, but if we don't lock the doors and the windows, it makes it much more problematic for you to try to keep people out or to keep your systems resilient and robust. And it also, once they get in, you want to be able to try to contain them somewhere. And again, you don't know what the tomorrow is. What you want to do is to be the cat in the cat and mouse game. I love that visual because that's what we use here too. So when I said that, we came to market trying to solve a problem where you have so many different endpoints that you just don't know how to protect, you need to do it in a way that is going to last a long time. We have read in the news every day or every week some other big compromise that's just happened. The most recent one that we all read about in that great scientific journal called, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, is the Log4j. Again, just words and things, but that was an approach that was enabled by the way that people built the system, that is with an operating system, with software on top of it. And what you'd like to do, instead of just locking the doors and windows, you want to put a blast door there. You want to be able to secure those in a way that just can't be broken in any usual sense or in any way that we want, and even as we think about with quantum compute coming. So what we do with the hardware is we create that barrier that as of today, we know we have no known way, but really fundamentally, more importantly, what it's about is that nobody can come in and modify it the way that you can. Software is awesome. That's why we have computers. That's why today it can be a game and tomorrow it's a word processor. We don't want security to be that flexible. We want it to do what we tell it to do, and in this case, protect that critical national infrastructure. So what the hardware gives us is that thing that can't be changed. It's called immutable, if you want those big words, but it means it can't be changed. And that's what we're bringing to this problem.
Well, I appreciate that. And just the fact that yesterday we must have used immutable about 5 times talking blockchain and peer-to-peer networking.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
right.
So, hey, that's another word, folks, that in the context of IT is exciting. And at the same time, I'm taking this from Ron's prior conversations we've had too, that, there's a reason that they talk about the technology stack, and now there's like security architecture stacks, right? And I feel like at various levels, you need different types of tools with certain capability, protecting certain types of data. And, I was going to just, leading up into Scott here, that, one of the key findings in the 2021 report card for America's infrastructure by way of the wonderful American Society for Engineers, ASCE, so a credible source. Asset management can not only help prioritize your funding, but also new technologies can pinpoint leaks, i.e., and target repairs in aging infrastructure. So, this is where I think the IT component, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, actionable intelligence, real-time monitoring, sensors, yes, you have to secure those communications. And I mean also communications security, but man, having the information at your fingertips and making sure you architect it starting with your hardware is a no-brainer. So Dr. Ron, appreciate that. Scott, marketing, right? You're an IT company and zero trust is the thing of things now. How do you address or dispel myth that you're not a point solution per se, but that people need to be thinking about zero trust when they're developing, or should we say modernizing the grid?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of things. We are a technology company. We certainly focus on IoT and OT, and work obviously to ensure we have any vulnerabilities between IT and OT. But building on some of the previous conversations in terms of starting with the executive order and some of the technology that can start to deliver against that, it strikes me, and it's pretty renowned in our company. We were meeting with a CIO of a large insurance company, and in going through kind of the landscape, what's going on, what are the threats, what are the trends, at the end, his answer was, well, what we have is good enough. So I think we all, probably as companies, face sometimes, how do you move away from your current security platforms? And we find this across industries, but we find it in some industries more than others. Infrastructure has probably some variability. Critical infrastructure has some variability as well. And then on top of that, you're introducing a new idea called zero trust. And this notion that in the past you basically would detect and monitor and try to take care of kind of bad actors. Zero trust is based on a DoD principle, which is you have to start closed. It isn't trust but verify. It is actually verify then trust, right? And that's the principle of zero trust. And the executive order, along with the NSA coming out and talking the importance of zero trust, as well as NIST, all hit at the same time. And then we had the whole Colonial Pipeline that was very much in the news, combined with the last Super Bowl where we had the water treatment plant. Kind of from those are two kind of, you know, infrastructure, utility kind of things. So the combination of all that, I think, has really stirred up interest in moving now more aggressively, I think, in taking advantage of the solution that we have at Enclave Networks. So just to give you a sense for that, and we can get into kind of, you know, where we focus on that as a follow-on, because I want to give the other Scott some time.
Yeah, no, we're coming to Scott. And again, we got plenty of time here. There's a couple resources that I will encourage our audience to Google, to read, to download. Obviously, 14028 is one of them, but there have been many follow-on documents. And I've heard, you know, from Scott talk about, you know, when bad things happen, natural disasters, that's usually when we determine, you know, how the lack of resilience. And you don't have to think about it too far, from a bridge to last year in Texas to Colonial to Superstorm Sandy to Katrina to the power outages in New York. But there are guides to industrial control system security, folks out at NIST. There is the North American Energy Resilience Model that the Department of Energy is guiding. You know, of course, the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Investment Act. There's a lot of material that speaks in plain English the state of affairs and why companies like these and Anterix, of course, and the utilities themselves are investing in technology to create that I can sleep knowing that the lights are going to turn on moment. So, Scott, you know, again, I would imagine when people talk to you, they're like, let's talk quantum computing and quantum information science. How does this play into it when it's the here and now utilities? And yeah, look, I run with the quantum people at the DOE still, and people like to say, that's 8 years out. You know, dispel a myth here on why quantum's, you know, in this discussion and part of your DNA.
Well, you're exactly right. A lot of people, when they think of quantum, they naturally go to the buzz around quantum computers, what quantum computers are going to do for us, all the great things that are coming. It's kind of like the metaverse, though. You know, the metaverse was coming 30, 40 years ago, right? But we're on the cusp of having the metaverse. We're on the cusp of having quantum computers. And the thing is, we really kind of are on the cusp of having quantum computers. And you know, as I said, that's gonna unlock great opportunity and great potential for us. But it also is going to present some new vulnerabilities, some vulnerabilities that we haven't even thought about. One of the things that critical infrastructure is dependent on is, and historically has been thought of as, hey, these flows, you know, that electricity has to flow, that water has to flow. And so stability was the model, you know, continuous flow. Now, because critical infrastructure also has to be connected in order to take advantage of some of the things that you know, that Don is bringing to this space. That connection also presents both opportunity and threat. The field of quantum is much more than just a computer. Quantum mechanics presents unique capability for sensing, for seeing things that we historically had not been able to see using classical methods. It's also going to give us a means of communicating in ways that we haven't been able to do previously. Some of the characteristics of superposition, entanglement, coherence, you know, yada yada yada, unlock a lot of potential in the utility space and critical infrastructure. Making sure that we address both those opportunities, that we're taking advantage of quantum computers to analyze, hey, what are our flow rates? What's the effect of all these electric cars that are plugging into my grid during the day or my grid at night. What's the impact of weather on my sustainable, on my solar or my wind power, while also using the capability in quantum to protect. And Ron mentioned immutable characteristics, immutable physical properties. Quantum presents or provides certain immutable qualities that are inherent in the physical environment that we can use both on the quantum computing side as well as our quantum communications and security for quantum computing.
Yeah, let me. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
No, I wanted you, I actually was going to say, because what I wrote down, which to me, you made a great leap, a great bridge for anybody watching, right? You can, yes, decoherence, superpositioning, spookiness of, watch Ant-Man, folks. I mean, there's quantum computing for you. And the metaverse, trust me, I got a 9-year-old. I actually get it. Watch the movie Ready Player One. It's here. And again, that's how I like to explain it to people versus trying to say, let's talk about superpositioning and photons. But Scott, I loved the sensing, the word sensing. Folks, Scott just brought up, look, we've been talking about these devices, the trillions of devices that talk to one another. Sensing the grid, or the grid sensing that there could be an outage or a falling line conductor or a tree that hit a wire that we need to know immediately to shut down because it could cause loss of life, or a wildfire. Sensing and having the fastest chipsets, the fastest computers. Forget quantum for a minute. It is the next generation. Okay, supercomputers are fast. Quantum computers, whew, somebody explained it to me once like this. If there was this mansion and it had 1 million rooms in it, and there was a mansion next to it with 1 million rooms in it, a supercomputer will find a penny in the one room pretty darn quickly, going room to room, really quickly though. Quantum, boom, every room at one time, they find it. Think about that with a cancer cell before it mutates. Think about that, when it comes to a car that's about to break. So I love that quantum's in the mix. I love that reference, and you gave me a reason to start telling my stories, pal, about how quantum and the grid are in a discussion together. So thank you for that. I have the next quick fire question, and is there any comments though from the group that just you heard something before we move into that next question? Yes, Mr. Fischer.
So I think when you started this off with it takes a village, I think you definitely saw, you put together quite a good panel, and Anterix, their security collective really does have a nice mix of people that together I think complement each other to have that kind of an approach. In listening to what everybody does, I think there's a lot of different angles. I think everybody has their role to play, so that was very interesting.
Good stuff.
Yeah, and I'll put on that zero trust architecture is people, it's things, and it's processes and procedures. And you need to address all of those elements in order to. It is not one toy that you've broken out of the box and now, hey, we're done. No, it is that cat and mouse. It is that cycle of defend, attack, defend, attack.
Yeah, and Scott, I would build on that. Say one additional thing is there's a psychological component to it as well. You're having to kind of change your whole point of view in terms of how you've done it in the past and how you need to approach it going forward. And for some, that can be challenging, right? So it's also kind of that mindset.
Paradigm shift comes to mind.
And one more like the defense in depth, you've got Don talking about detection. We're active security at the endpoint. Those two work together really, really well. And then you start talking about advanced encryption, and you start to put together layers that make it exponentially harder for bad things to happen. And then as we talk about nation states or advanced persistent threat or national security threats, that's the kind of things you want, right? Nobody's going to be bulletproof, but all three together make it awful difficult.
Yep. Don, go for it.
I agree with that, but I have to play the part of security curmudgeon a little bit. I've been working with information security for over 20 years. We've been talking about some of the same concepts for over 20 years, and there's still issues today. And so that tells me that it's not always a technology problem. It's the fact that you have human beings operating these things. I ran the threat intelligence team at NTT Security. I was interested in nation state actors and APTs. I'm also concerned about the IT guy who's being pushed by his company to provide connectivity to some sensors that never had it before because it has an operational benefit, and he makes a mistake, right? So this idea that, and I agree, the Anterix ecosystem bringing this all together is great, but I think that you need to be thinking about this as we always need to be right. The bad guy only needs to be right once, right? So we need something we need tools that are automated that help prevent attacks from occurring, because the old days of trying to follow up on threats and use the word actionable intelligence. I used to use that all the time. I like applied intelligence, right? Let's be able to use it immediately in our tools and be able to prevent things from happening immediately.
Yeah, I just want to riff off that because that's great segue, because there is a difference. Actionable intelligence, I always think of, Don, as, wow, look what's happened. How can we take action? Applied intelligence really is, you're right. The minute it happens, something kicks in. And that's where I think all of you, frankly, have expressed. And I do want to dive in a little bit more to your awesome technologies, because it's like if we can go in our next round with sort of the unique capability, the differentiation of binary armor and QNet and so forth, Packet Viper and so, let's do that. But I just want to thank everybody, because I thought it was well said. I think it was Scott Packard: people, process, procedure. And you did say the things, but let's stick with the alliteration. You had the 3 Ps. I love that it was said it's not a technology problem, right? Technology is not the problem. It's getting the culture. It's getting the mindset. It's, yes, knowing the bad guy just needs or gal once. But, the federal government uses any opportunity to push continuous diagnostics and mitigation. That's a word I like, mitigation, not elimination. And there's a reason, a cybersecurity framework, folks, you should read on the NIST website that talks about, not just, detecting and responding, but my friend Dave Mons, Dr. Dave Mons at Pacific Northwest National Lab, says we have to focus on how do we respond. And the quicker we respond, the more lives we save. So thank you for that first, kind of go around. Here's the next question. Now, here's the rule again: 11 words or less, and no bonus points. You just say what you want, but it's going to get us now into something I think that's really important, and that is around the industries, right? There is a utility industry that has been doing things forever the way it's been doing it, but they are a business that own and operate 80 to 90% of the infrastructure in our country. So here's the question. Start with, we'll go with Scott Packard and work our way. Scott Packard, Scott Martin, Ron, Don, and then Peter. What is the most positive movement you've seen utilities make in terms of cyber physical security in the past 2 years? Scott Packard.
Abandoning security by obscurity.
Okay, good one. Scott Martin.
Don't have the doctor, just the master.
Hey.
5 words or less, 10 words or less. I mean, they've built up the intelligence and digitalization of their business to be able to deploy the latest technology. There's a lot more words than that. So in other words, they've positioned themselves to kind of take the next step around kind of the new kind of solutions that I think will button them down. But they had to take that first step around digitization and modernization, and they just need to go one step further.
Yeah, the evolution. And then I think it was right. It's like have a plan and then try to make that plan actionable. Excuse me. Dr. Ron Indek.
Stop that. And so kind
you
of
earned it,
furthering
man.
that,
You have earned it.
Yeah. Just taking that and seeing how the industry is changing. Just recognize the industry recognizing that OT is something that's important from a security standpoint. So, I mean, OT's always been important. The SCADA systems, I know somebody was talking earlier about, it always had to be, stable. but now OT needs to be secure. And I think that's a good recognition because it isn't ever going to happen without that.
100%. I think the OT IT, back to that integration, it's two different types of technologies with different security requirements, and we have to learn how to speak the language and make it all work. Well said.
And
Don
different
Gray.
people trained. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I to sort of echo Scott's comment, right? That operating cyber physical systems in isolation is no longer viable, right? There's too many business benefits from having those systems be connected, be getting telemetry off of them, that sort of thing. So it's just you can't hide anymore.
100%. Peter Fischer.
I'm going to take a little different twist. I'm going to talk infrastructure bill and some of the cyber provisions for things like edge security and other advanced solutions.
Yeah, I like that all, and the word in action, I want to say to all my utility colleagues, I think it's less about assuming they're not taking action. It's just late adoption and early adoption. And we all know that when it happens to you, this is probably a bad correlation, but until you get COVID, you realize, oh man, that is not something fun to have. Well, until you've been compromised in a utility, you probably have a different perspective on how should we be planning? What should we be investing in? Who should we be calling Anterix to help us build a solution to meet our specific utility needs? So, all right, let's go there. Peter Fischer, binary armor, a little bit more about it, what makes it unique. And, I would ask all of you as technology engineering types to speak in as technical as you want, but use 4 examples. And maybe we could talk a little bit about, without your secret sauce, how much of an emphasis you put on that concept of securing design principles into your intellectual property. Peter.
So with binary armor, we wanted to take the premise of, look, operational technology is out there and it's used for a purpose, right? It might be a complex system, but it is machine-to-machine communications. It's control systems, so it's well-defined. Can you build a solution that only allows what's safe operations, and everything else by default is not allowed? So binary armor is designed to sit right at those critical systems, right at your substations, along your pipelines. Binary armor inspects all traffic going to and from those systems, and we allow you to tune your security to match how your system is supposed to work. So with binary armor, our goal and what we've been able to prove in US government labs, in US Air Force labs, and industry labs is there is a path to having security that adapts to your system and only allows safe things to happen.
Amazing response, because I love the word tuning, and the fact that you're, if I'm not mistaken, 1963, you guys have been around and gals the block a bit. I think it's a great point you made about, look, COT solutions is not what we're talking about here. Your tools, specifically your collection of tools, can be tuned to what that specific asset in a utility needs in that moment. So Peter, great stuff. We'll keep on this theme of architecture, and really I think this is the segment where I hope anybody watching understands that the uniqueness of companies like these 5 folks, don't label them as you only need one. Okay, you may need one for a bit, but guess what? Collectively, this is why Anterix put this group together. Don Gray.
Yes, sir. Packet Viper is focused on being able to, as we talked about, detect and respond to potentially malicious activity that's happening on a network. And we've been able to do that with distributed OT assets like we talked about that are connected through cellular connectivity or microwave point-to-point connectivity that aren't sort of regular kind of IT assets. And we've also been able to do it on the boundary between those IT and OT organizations. And we do that through using a couple different things. I talked earlier about applied intelligence, and that intelligence can be derived from a couple different sources. One of those is by using deception and deceptive techniques on the network. And so we're able to not necessarily, as Peter was talking about, sort of knowing exactly what's there, So we've talked with clients that have gone through some transition from a security standpoint. So we've talked to CIOs that are now newly in charge of OT security at their organization. And frankly, they don't have a good picture of what is actually occurring on their network, what vendors are in their network, what they're doing in their network. And so we can help bring some transparency and visibility into those networks so they can start to make the kinds of decisions about what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And in the meantime, we can throw up some sensors and some decoys and some sirens that will help identify any activity that would be of concern to us.
You know, Don, I loved your reference to, and it's been brought up, folks, distributed energy resources, DERs, right? There's a reason that it's not just about solar and wind and renewables. It's if the grid goes down, can we bring it back up using other elements of power? And the answer is yes, and we need to work at that, right? And that is where you start, I think if you can picture, not you folks, by the way, the folks out in the audience, this interconnectivity, the integration, the reason we have zero trust is it's not a little bubble anymore of just a utility and its customers. It's all interconnected. Everything's interconnected, as we probably know. So great point on that. And I love, by the way, you did bring up an acronym last time. You're like Mr. Acronym, and I was waiting for one this time, but the APT's Advanced Persistent Threat. So come on, work on your acronyms, DG, because we want to educate. Hey, great stuff. We'll come back to that, and shout out, you know, the deception, make it really hard for the bad actor or actors is brilliant. Ron, QNet, I mean, turn this discussion of hardware encryption and cryptography into a sexy topic that people should be like, yes, I need some of that.
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think Don and Peter already gave us painted a picture of the network, the things that are flowing on the network. And, you know, what we have to also remember is that these systems were designed in the 70s, maybe built in the 80s and 90s, last updated maybe in 2000. The devices are old. In many instances, the things that we're trying to protect and connect to are already deprecated. The operating system is Windows 7 or Windows NT. You can't ask those devices, you can't ask a network that's been there doing its job, it's been stable for 2 decades, but you can't ask it to do the cybersecurity. So you want to bring that compute resource, that security, that capability to the network. And then if you do it right, and you know, part of it is this hardware piece, which we can get to in just a bit, but if you could just drop it in as a secure network overlay, you just put it in and the endpoints don't have to change. They don't even know that we're there. The network doesn't have to change. It doesn't know that we're there, but we protect all the things that, you know, Don and Peter were talking about from that kind of attack, especially. So you brought up the DERs, the distributed energy resource. As the world goes green, most of those things, wind turbines and solar arrays, those are all things that are distributed. So we're getting more, not less. And so we have to be able to protect those things while they are afar. And why is the hardware important? It's important not just to be able to create that ability to drop in, do its job right away, and to plug and play and walk away, but the fact that it will be able to secure for a long time. They call it, the NSA and NIST call it quantum compute resistant, but you know, qubit tech, I absolutely understand that. What does that really mean? But to combine the ease of use and usability, so we don't have a difficult training on the staff, and the fact that it is something that is very strong and will last for years, if not decades, is a real plus to these complicated critical networks.
Yeah, a couple things you said there, especially right at the end there, the complicated critical networks. Largest, oldest, and most antiquated aging infrastructure network in our country. I was told this when I walked the halls at DOE, and I know it's still to be true. If Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell came back today, I think we'd all say Bell would be like, man, what the heck did you do with my phone system? That's awesome. What do you think Edison would say? Still doing what I did. No, I say that in jest, right? It is an infrastructure that you don't fiddle with too much, but hey, now's the time. We're seeing things happen. We're seeing bad actors take over pipeline that, bring everything to a standstill. Supply chain, security comes into play, but, hey, you made it sexy. Quantum compute encryption just sounds like, man, I want some of that. So thank you, Ron, but I'm going to keep calling you Dr. Ron. Scott Martin, we're talking a little bit about messaging, and you've hit on zero trust. It's a thing you build, and you're a great company. I know you are. I know this your folks in your business, from the C-level, down to some of the folks that are working on specific projects. Great company, you get it. And I know you're tracking Memorandum 22-09, which is again a reference for everybody to see what the government's trying to go and where it's going with zero trust. But Scott, there are a lot of products out there. What are maybe one or two of your challenges with saying, yeah, we do that, but here's how we do it and what makes us unique?
No, that's a great question. I mean, there's, if you look at the zero trust principles or frameworks, I mean, there are different organizations that hit some of them that try to hit all of them. There's different approaches. There's overlays versus, fully integrated. I mean, there's just different approaches. The one thing I would say is we start with, let's understand what's on the network, what's on your networks, asset discovery, right? And there's different ways to do that. We partner with companies that do that really well. We do that ourselves. But that is key because, as you all know from I mentioned a couple previous hacks. Another one we haven't talked about was SolarWinds, where there was an intrusion and it had been sitting there and it activated downstream, and they never knew it, right? Despite the fact that they're a cybersecurity company. So, first you need to understand that landscape. But what we also really do uniquely, and we do that, is we do, some might call it ID segmentation or micro-segmentation. And we are an overlay network, just like, I think Peter suggested or Ron suggested. So that makes it easier to deploy and more cost effective. And in that process, using micro-segmentation, we understand what's on the network. We cryptographically separate the OT from the IoT or IT, so we don't have those intrusions from a vulnerability standpoint. And the thing, and we try not to talk about blockchain, but nobody's done a blockchain kind of ring today so far, so I will. So we do use blockchain, and just received the full patent on that blockchain solution, which basically manages the certificate management and the trust verification. And we continuously reassess the trust using our blockchain solution. And that ultimately keeps the network safe and the stuff separated as it's supposed to be. And just because you've been trusted to begin with doesn't mean you get back in. You have to re-establish your trust. Again, that's all built into our blockchain solution. But the key piece of micro-segmentation, which I know Forrester and Gartner talk quite a bit about, and that's an emerging area, and that's something we focus on and have some unique approaches.
So couldn't agree more, and I'm glad you brought up micro-segmentation again for the audience. Think about a network. It's huge, right? It's not just the grid. Just think of the network in your company or business or in your house, right? I did a scan on my own house the other day. I'm like, I got that many devices connected to that route. I thought it was 3. It was like 33. But being able to do segmentation of a network to secure certain components, to ensure that some data needs to be really protected, if you will, versus others that, of course, you want protected, but maybe doesn't require as much. That's the kind of detail that you have to be thinking about if you're a utility today, and or any business. But I love the blockchain. I would love to talk to you more about that, especially with regard to certificate management.
We can nerd out on that. It might not be me nerding out on it, but we have the folks that can do that.
You said enough for people to go, and there it is. The word was brought in, but we're not going crypto on everybody right now. We're going to stay too, because blockchain is a great way to create trust peer-to-peer networking device, networking, if you will, infrastructure. And thank you for bringing it up. But I love reestablishing trust as well. Okay. Scott, let's go there, man. I mean, we talked a little quantum. We know you're saying you don't have a quantum computer doing everything because, they're kind of tough to build and they're expensive and they're probably hard to charge for. But, give us some of the not secret sauce, but stuff you get excited about when you get to tell people what makes your company so special.
Well, we're going to avoid complex topics like blockchain and cryptocurrency and stick to something simple like quantum mechanics. So my brother, first I want to talk about something that may be top of mind to some of our listeners. My brother works at East Bay Mud up in the Oakland area, and they're in the process of replacing some of the infrastructure moving water that's been in the ground for over 100 years. You know, when we start talking about, you know, hey, you gotta totally wipe the slate clean and introduce all these new technologies. The folks who have to pony up the money are doing the Aikmuller suck and going, ooh, that's going to be expensive. So one of the things that we really wanted to pay attention to was the ability to give utilities an appliance that they could plug into existing their existing networks. Now there are some conditions that you would need when you're installing what Cubatech provides, like fiber optics in most instances, although we do the free space optical channels. So Cubatech's quantum insured defense, our quantum safe network security gives you two things. The first is a cryptographic key that is essentially uncrackable. Now, the term that's used is information theoretic security. Why do they say that? Well, every system has vulnerabilities to side channel attacks. And I'm not here to blow sunshine and say that, hey, plug us in and you're done. Because everything that each of these other gentlemen are talking about are essential components to a 360 degree defense, covering all avenues. So we have this cryptographic key. And so why is this cryptographic key so secure? Well, it's not based on super hard math, the factorization of integers that has been demonstrated to be vulnerable to quantum computers. It's based on properties of the universe, actual true randomness of the universe to basically produce two symmetric keys. So that's one thing. We have an uncrackable key. The second thing is the transmission line is immune to eavesdropping. So I date myself here. You know, Peter, you said use an example. Like those of us old enough to remember the party line. You pick up.
Well, real quick, we better celebrate. It is great that you turned 40 today, but keep going.
Right. You pick up the phone and you're hearing your neighbor share a conversation with you know, whomever. The same sort of thing exists in the internet today, is that all the traffic that's moving over it can be tapped into by any person. Now, that information is secure based on existing cryptography, right? You know, what's moving through that line is not, you know, Aunt May's recipe. It's, you know, Aunt May's recipe garbled up so you can't listen to it. Now, if it's Aunt May's recipe, most people, you know, hey, they don't care necessarily if somebody knows, you know, hears it or listens to it. But it maybe if it's a recipe to Coca-Cola, then maybe somebody cares. Or maybe if it's information that, should it be disclosed, would create severe or serious damage to our national security. Well, then people care. One of the capabilities, and we did it with tapping into fiber cables. If you're ever interested in a great book, Blind Man's Bluff, talks about our submarine force, how we tapped into undersea fiber optic cables to basically listen to the Soviets' mail. So the ability to tap into a fiber optic cable or, you know, twisted pair or whatever it is and collect that information. Maybe I can't I can't read it today because it's garbled, and it's garbled in a way that I don't have the capability. But let's say 10, 15, 20 years down the road, we have certain secrets that we don't want anybody to know for 20, 30, in some instances, 50 years, because it would cause grave damage to our country.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that, so based on, I don't want to whip out too much physics here, but Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, that line that shares this entanglement cannot be tapped into without disclosing the presence of the eavesdropper. And as soon as you know an eavesdropper is there, you turn off your communications, or you shift to another line so that a person can't harvest your encrypted information to break it later.
So folks, if you heard that in your utility, I mean, obviously a solution like Qubitex kind of appears to be one that would really protect important data, and there's physics behind it, and all these, again, it's a taste of where we're going, because it sounds like whether it's tomorrow, the next month, or the year after, these, I think Don brought it up, the threat actors are sitting there waiting for us to think we got it figured out, just so that they could do something else. And it's, you know, not to say it's a game, but look, you got to be thinking about this if you're in a utility and you're thinking about how can we protect that data in an aging infrastructure. And we heard everybody talk a bit, without giving it away, their unique value. And I appreciate that. So here's the deal. We're about 13 minutes out. We still need parting shots at the end, but I got another question. It's not going to be in 5 words or less, or what have you. But I think it's important to kind of tie this up. And it's when it comes to cyber and physical security and solutions, each of which you all represent that ecosystem. What would you say to a utility? And maybe you're having those conversations about, you know, I used the word earlier, inaction. Because I feel it's not something you should have to force on, but they should be embracing. And it's an opportunity for utilities to do what Graham Bell did, or what we did with the telephony system. So Peter, you know, maybe lean on a conversation you've had with, and speak from while we all know there's some that don't want to embrace this modernization transformation agenda, talk about the opportunity for the utility and what, you know, what not taking action, you know, can result in. And that's for everybody.
And you know, I think we've all had this challenge of people saying good enough. I believe it was Scott that said, you know, what we have is currently good enough, and part of that is inertia, right? Part of that is not doing something is a lot easier than doing something, and I think it's upon us as technology providers to help make that as easy as possible, to have solutions. And like Ron said, you know, Ron said, talking about having a hardware solution that you can drop in as an overlay. And that's why our product it's a software to embed inside of something, and we have a hardware overlay. But I think that's a very important thing to put in there. And, you know, the last part I'd throw out there is this is too important, right? The electric grid is important for our way of life, our entire economy, our national security. Our way of life depends on getting this right. So I think we have a role to play. The utilities have a role to play, having a positive feedback loop. Again, going back to the infrastructure bill, that can act as a catalyst to get those discussions going, to get those technologies out there, get them refined so that they're easy to just drop in and solve those problems.
Hey, I would be standing up in a class and clapping. Well, I could, but I don't want to disrupt this. And I appreciate that. That was so wonderfully eloquent. And here's why I want to riff off something that's in some report about the infrastructure bill, which I think captures this. It says the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, at the time also known as the infrastructure bill, when it becomes law, but it is, will make available $1.2 trillion in funding for infrastructure programs across energy, transportation, and water. Why is that? Because they're all at risk. And when they're at risk, our lives are at risk. Peter, I loved it. Don Gray, thoughts?
My thoughts on the risk of inaction is that you end up with more events happening, more visible, very public, very, impactful from a media standpoint events that drive legislation and mandates that are probably not going to result in you getting the opportunity to control how you spend and what you spend on from a security standpoint. So I think that, the smarter play is we've always said that whenever you're designing your security program, if you're designing a security program and you're building security in from the beginning, you can always make the compliance requirements that you need to have because you have a secure basis to build off of. You end up spending less money overall. So I think that that's a big risk, is that you get boxed into a corner and have to spend money in a very inefficient way.
Well said. And to that note, I think that again speaks to, it's not forcing the hand. It's, personally, I could say this, I'm agnostic in this, but when the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission comes out with a notice of proposed rulemaking to look at internal network security monitoring for high and medium impact bulk electric systems, cyber systems, I have that memorized because I talk about it a lot. That's telling you something, folks.
Right.
That's the utility industry saying, NERC CIP standards aside, and we got a lot of them, we got to start worrying about things that we're seeing happen each and every day. So thank you, Don. Ron Endek, inaction thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. So Pete, you and Don and Peter all hit really the reason for it, that it is critical. You even mentioned, I think it was you, that, power runs everything. You're not going to have a water or oil if you don't have the power, because they need to run it. Inaction, I used to think that we'd have discussions with people, and I used to say, well, it isn't a matter really of if something's going to happen, but when. But I think we're beyond that, Pete. I really think that it is happening. We are losing. We're not on top of it. I would go so far as to say, and I'm not a Debbie Downer, I'm not a negative Nancy or whatever. It isn't that, we're trying to get people excited, but we are losing, and we have to do something, or it's going to only get worse. And as you said, people's lives are at risk. So.
Ron, succinct and to the point, you're right. I mean, look, it's not if it's when. And again, folks, when you think about some disasters, I mean, Katrina comes to mind. I've been to New Orleans. I've seen what they're still recovering from. And when you think about, there had to be people saying, well, I think we're going to be good if some kind of Category 5 hurricane hits at this point, but we don't know. And then, you see the results. Superstorm Sandy, those pictures where I go to the Jersey Shore, I'm like, I can't believe that happened, and look what it did, and how did we not be better prepared? Net. By the way, before we go over to Scott Martin, it is interesting. I've never heard negative Nancy and Debbie Downer. I'm like, we got to throw some dudes in there. Like, I hate to say it, but Peter, we're two Pete's, or maybe it's the Peter pessimist in us. So that's just a thought.
Yeah.
Scott Martin, thoughts on utility inaction and the opportunity that they also have right now to invest in companies to make their grid more resilient?
Yeah, and I don't think utilities are alone in that, right? You look at healthcare and some other industries as well that have been slower to move for a variety of reasons. And we do research, and we talk to CISOs and CIOs and CTOs, and there's interest, and then there's questions around budget. When do you think you're going to have budget? And they're struggling to figure out, when should I do this? I'm going to have to hold off. And I think this aligns very similar with what I'm hearing. It's like that scene from, well, you just have to put one foot in front of the other, and you just have to start with something maybe smaller, right? And we talk a lot at Enclave Networks about just protect a building, just protect a system, one system, start first. You're not necessarily spending money out of the gate, or do you need to be an expert out of the gate to get things moving? And in fact, that first step is probably the most critical one. And then you'll start to understand what it's going to take and how to kind of plan for it and so forth. So again, our advice would be, just start small maybe, and start to kind of, test it out. And, I know all of us here in the Alliance, as well as with Anterix, are there to kind of partner and kind of, figure that out with you. That's the approach that we take.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, to just as we're closing this out here, and we are going to parting shot. So Scott, you have to say something, then we got 5 minutes for the final parting shot. But show me a person without a plan, I'll show you a person who plans to fail. And I think Ron, starting with things like the hardware and the operating system, and then going to the next gate, it makes sense, right? We all are in this rush to say, just give me the thing, I'll buy it and plug it in. Enterprise architecture principles 101 are, architect, invest, implement. We do too much implement, or we buy the stuff, we plug it in, we hope it works. Not a good plan in my book. Scott Packard, inaction, utilities, opportunity.
Yeah, so as Scott said, it's basically how do you eat the elephant one bite at a time. We did a test bed program with EPB out of Chattanooga and Oak Ridge National Labs, where we demonstrated the true value. That demonstration not only won an R&D 100 award, but it also showed folks who do have to keep an eye towards the bottom line that the investment is going to, in the long term, is going to show dividends. Now, it helps that we have a technology that not only protects, but also will be kind of the interstitials, the connection between quantum processors. So we are providing some dual use capability. But right off the bat, what you have to be able to demonstrate is where's the value at? Colonial Pipeline, the cost of I don't want to throw anybody on the bus. I don't know anybody at Colonial, but some antiquated approaches to security resulted in billions of dollars lost. Not to mention the human factors on all of those people who were left without access to energy. So you can look to your customers, you can look to the citizens of this country in the face and say, yes, we're doing the things that add this resiliency so that you're not left basically flipping the switch and no lights come on. I can tell you, operating out of Iraq,
real quick, we got 2 minutes, bud, when we got to go around one more time. Okay, so no, I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to give everybody one more shot at the parting shot. So again, this is the purpose of today. It's look, it takes a conversation to start, and it might take sit down with Anterix, find about the tools they work with, but at the end of the day, it's got to be a custom solution, and there's no shortage of things that have happened that we can learn from. So 3:18, 30 seconds or less, because some parting shots important, guys. What did you take away from today listening to one another? And what do you impart on the audience that took the time to tune in today? Peter Fischer.
Okay, real quick, S&C is in this to, we're a national defense focused company. We're in this to make a difference for the utilities. We build binary armor to protect against three things: cyber threats, insider threats, and even accidents or operator errors. And we look forward to working with the rest of the collective and the utilities to help make that happen.
Perfect. Don Gray.
Again, I think it was great hearing everybody's different solutions. And it is great to be part of the Anterix framework. I think that from a Packet Viper perspective, we can help organizations today become more secure very quickly. I told you that, I have 20 years experience in information security, and, we've learned some lessons from that. No false positives, applied intelligence, very quick value time to be able to do some of the things that some of the others are talking about from a more longer term perspective.
Thank you. Dr. Ron.
So people talk about glass half empty, half full. Well, mine is all empty, but I'm still an optimist. When I see Anterix and what they've put together, all of us on here, there's no doubt in my mind that we can solve these challenges, and we can become the cat in the cat and mouse game. We have a unique piece that's very valuable, and I know that all of the rest of the team does here. And again, I just encourage people to, go to Anterix, go to these companies, and we will work to solve your problems, your needs.
Well said. The words problem solvers are really what stick with me. Scott.
Which
Martin.
one?
Yeah, Scott Martin.
So, hey, really quickly, one thing I want to emphasize is not all zero trust players are the same. And I'm not going to suggest there's posers out there, but, certainly lean in heavily in terms of, what is real zero trust and how do you deploy it and how do you implement it and how is it unique? And then secondly, just the webinar indicates just something that's always important to us. Partnering and alliances are critical in this endeavor. So again, just reinforcing that through Anterix Security Alliance is really great.
Absolutely. Scott Packard, close us out.
Yeah, I think, and several gentlemen touched on it, is the approach to security is multifaceted and multi-layered. And what Anterix really brings is both immediate solutions as well as future-proofed solutions. And you get a lot by engaging with the collective. I certainly have learned a lot from the gentleman just in this brief discussion. So.
Well, thank you all. And in the spirit of closing it out, again, shout out to everybody who made this happen. Each of you taking your time. You are representative of a tapestry of wisdom, as I like to say, that's growing. I think the Security Collective represents not an easy button, but a place utilities can go to hear about all the complexity, but maybe it's, as I call, a Linus blanket kind of concept that utilities can look at. So it can be scary and all that good stuff. But I think each of you today educated, informed, and enlightened our audience, and I'm grateful and blessed to be a part of it. So thank you, and of course, thanks to all of the Anterix people pulling it together. We will talk again soon.
Thanks,
Nice
Pete.
job on your part.
Thanks, Anterix.